Okay, ready to dive into some serious economic theory?
You bet.
Today we're tackling a book that's, well, known for being a bit of a brain twister.
You could say that.
The General Theory of Employment, Interest, and Money.
By the one and only John Maynard Keynes.
Yeah, he wasn't afraid to ruffle some feathers, was he?
Not exactly known for holding back.
So, to make this deep dive a little less intimidating.
We're going to break down the key ideas.
And stuff that really matters, right?
Exactly. And we'll even hear some excerpts read by our AI narrator.
Kind of like mindful moments, but for economics.
That's a great way to put it.
You can get those brain-boosting insights on the go.
Perfect for those with busy lives.
And trust me, Keynes had some seriously groundbreaking ideas.
He challenged the economic orthodoxy of his time.
And people were not happy about it.
So imagine it's the Great Depression.
Talk about a time of economic turmoil.
And Keynes comes along and says, hey, everything we think we know about economics might be wrong.
Ooh, I could feel the tension already.
He basically took aim at what were then called classical economics ideas.
So what were these sacred cows he was challenging?
Well, one of the big ones was the idea that markets are self-correcting.
So like everything just magically works itself out.
Pretty much. For example, they believed if wages went down, unemployment would go down too.
So it's just like supply and demand for any other product, right?
Exactly. Lower prices, more buyers.
Makes sense, but Keynes wasn't buying it.
He saw things a bit differently.
What was his counter-argument then?
He argued that psychology, like people's expectations about the future, plays a huge role.
Okay, so it's not just these cold, hard economic forces at play.
Exactly. Think about it. If people are scared about losing their jobs,
They might cling to their money even tighter, right?
even if it means accepting lower wages.
Makes sense. Fear can definitely mess with those neat economic models.
And that's where Keynes' concept of effective demand comes in.
Effective demand.
He was basically saying it's not enough for people to just want to work.
There needs to be actual demand for the stuff they could produce.
Right. You could have tons of people willing to work.
But if nobody's buying what they'd make,
It doesn't really matter.
this is starting to explain why economic downturns can feel so baffling.
Absolutely. It's not just individual choices, it's the whole system getting stuck.
Okay, starting to get the picture. So, what did Keynes propose as a solution when demand plummets like that? Did he have some sort of magic formula?
Well, he had some pretty radical ideas about the role of government.
Like what?
He believed that in some cases, the government has to step in
Step in and do what?
to stimulate demand when private investment is weak.
Whoa, that's a pretty big departure from the whole laissez-faire attitude.
Yeah.
So he was saying sometimes you got to spend money to make money.
But he wasn't just talking about individuals, he was talking about governments.
I bet that really shook things up back then.
It was a huge challenge to the prevailing economic wisdom.
Now I'm really starting to see why those classical economists might have been a little upset.
You could say that.
But to really understand why Keynes thought government intervention was so important.
We have to dig into another one of his key concepts,
Please.
the inducement to invest.
Okay, so we've talked about the desire to buy stuff.
Now we're getting into what makes businesses want to spend their money.
What drives their investment decisions?
Right. And Keynes argued that one of the biggest factors is something he called the marginal efficiency of capital.
Marginal efficiency of capital. Sounds complicated.
It sounds fancy, but it really boils down to how much return investors expect to get from a new project.
Oh, okay. So it's like weighing the potential reward against the risk.
Exactly. And here's the thing. Keynes argued that these expectations aren't just based on hard data.
So it's not just about crunching numbers and looking at spreadsheets.
Right. He said psychology plays a big role.
It's about gut feelings and intuition.
Think about those times when everyone's convinced the price of something is going to skyrocket.
And then it crashes back down to earth.
Exactly.
Yeah, like when everybody thought insert current relevant asset was the next big thing.
Seems like emotions can be just as powerful as logic.
So if expectations are so fickle, how can we ever have a stable economy?
That was Keynes' point. He saw these swings in investor sentiment, the optimism and pessimism.
As a key driver of those boom and bust cycles we see in economies.
And that's where his ideas about government come back into play.
So if things start spiraling downward, the government could step in and try to stabilize things.
That's the idea.
Yeah.
But Keynes' thinking didn't stop at government spending.
He had another revolutionary concept up his sleeve.
You bet. He called it liquidity preference.
Liquidity preference. Sounds like something out of a finance textbook.
It is, but it's also deeply human. Keynes observed that people hold on to cash or things they can easily turn into cash.
For reasons beyond just buying everyday things, right?
Exactly. He argued that money isn't just a tool for transactions.
It's a way to feel secure, especially when the future seems uncertain.
Like having some cash on hand just in case. You know, that feeling.
The just in case might be different for everyone, but the feeling's pretty universal.
Exactly. And here's the interesting part. The lower the expected return on investments, like when interest rates are low,
The more attractive it becomes to just hold on to that cash.
even if it's not earning anything.
So even if the government tries to encourage spending by lowering interest rates, people might just hoard their money because they're too nervous to invest.
You got it.
Keynes recognized that this, he had a name for it, didn't he?
He called it the liquidity trap.
Liquidity trap.
Huh.
And it could make those traditional economic tools less effective.
Especially during a downturn.
So Keynes was really turning economic thinking on its head.
He was arguing that human psychology plays a much bigger role than anyone had realized.
Things like fear and uncertainty, they can really throw a wrench in the works.
Absolutely. And we've really just scratched the surface of his insights.
There's so much more to explore.
Oh, there's a lot more to unpack in the general theory.
Well, we're definitely going to need a longer deep dive for that. So stay tuned. We're just getting started with our journey into the world of John Maynard Keynes.
It's going to be a fascinating ride. Welcome back to our deep dive into Keynes' The General Theory.
I'm ready for more.
So we've seen how things like fear and uncertainty,
They can really mess with those economic models.
and how sometimes government spending,
It might actually be necessary.
right, to kind of kickstart things.
Yeah, it's definitely challenging some of my old assumptions about how economics works.
That's the thing about Keynes.
It's like seeing the world with new eyes.
Exactly.
So where do we go from here?
Well, let's take those new eyes and use them to look at the trade cycle.
You mean like those boom and bust periods?
Right, those ups and downs that economies seem to go through.
Yeah, what causes those roller coaster rides anyway?
That's what fascinated Keynes'
Cosmo-
classical economics with that focus on self-correcting markets.
Yeah.
It couldn't really explain these cycles.
So what did Keynes say about these wild swings?
Well, he argued that it all comes down to the fluctuations of something we
Okay.
talked about earlier,
Let me guess.
the marginal efficiency of capital.
Right. That's how much return investors expect to get from a project.
Exactly.
So you're saying these booms and busts are driven by like waves of optimism and pessimism.
That's a big part of it.
So explain how that works.
Imagine a period of high confidence.
Everyone's feeling good about the future.
Businesses are eager to invest, to expand, to hire more people.
So the marginal efficiency of capital is high.
Exactly.
And it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy, right?
Mhm.
That belief in a bright future leads to the actions that make it happen.
Right.
But what happens when the mood changes?
Well, as investment increases, competition heats up,
Oh, I see.
profit margins shrink, and those rosy expectations start to fade.
So the marginal efficiency of capital declines.
And businesses become more hesitant to invest.
Ah, that's where the downward spiral begins.
Less investment means job losses, people cut back on spending, and demand falls even further.
A vicious cycle.
And Keynes believed it could go on for a very long time, unless something was done to break the cycle.
So did Keynes think the government should just constantly be spending money to prop up the economy?
Not exactly.
So what did he propose?
He advocated for what he called counter-cyclical fiscal policy.
Counter-cyclical fiscal policy.
It means the government should use its spending power to counteract those natural swings of the business cycle,
So like spend more during a downturn
to boost demand,
and then save more during an upturn.
to prevent things from overheating.
It's like using a steering wheel to keep the economy from veering off course.
That's a good analogy.
So how does this all tie back to his critique of interest rates?
Well, Keynes believed that interest rates aren't just about the supply and demand for savings and investment.
Which is what classical economists believed, right?
Right, exactly.
So what did Keynes add to the equation?
He said liquidity preference also plays a role.
Right, that desire to hold on to cash. So during times of uncertainty, people hoard cash even if interest rates are low.
And that throws a wrench into the classical theory.
I'm starting to see the connections here.
That's
It's like all these different pieces of the puzzle are fitting together.
the goal.
So this liquidity trap,
Oh, right.
it can make traditional monetary policy
Like lowering interest rates to spur investment,
less effective.
like pushing on a string, as they say.
So if people are holding on to their cash, how do you get them to spend it?
That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
And one that economists are still grappling with today.
So did Keynes have an answer?
He argued that in these situations, fiscal policy,
Like government spending?
on things like infrastructure projects,
Yeah.
it could be more effective than just manipulating interest rates.
So it's not just about making money cheaper to borrow. It's about actually putting it to work.
Exactly.
Wow. Keynes was really a master of understanding all these complex moving parts of the economy.
He really was.
It's making me want to go back and read the general theory myself.
It's a great read.
Though I have to admit, it's not exactly light reading.
No, it's definitely a challenge.
But that's why we're doing these deep dives.
To make these ideas more accessible.
Right. So what are the main takeaways for our listeners today?
Let's see. I'd say there are 3 key things to remember.
Okay. I'm all ears.
First, markets aren't always self-correcting.
Right. They can get stuck.
And that's where the government might need to step in.
Okay, what else?
Second, effective demand is crucial.
It's not enough just to have people willing to work.
Right. There needs to be demand for the things they could produce.
And finally,
Psychology matters.
those gut feelings and expectations.
They can have a huge impact on economic decisions.
I'm definitely starting to see the world through a Keynesian lens.
Good.
But here's a question that's been bugging me.
Yeah.
Are these ideas, developed during the Great Depression?
Yeah.
Are they really still relevant today?
That's something economists are still debating. Some argue his ideas are outdated,
Right.
but many others believe they're more relevant than ever. Because we still face many of the same challenges.
Like financial crises, economic uncertainty, and political polarization?
Right.
It does feel like we're seeing some echoes of those times.
The world has changed in many ways.
Right.
But the underlying principles of human behavior and economics,
Yeah.
they remain remarkably similar.
So are you saying we should all go out and read the general theory to understand what's happening in the world today?
Well, I wouldn't necessarily recommend diving into the full text unless you're ready for a serious challenge.
Fair enough.
But even a basic understanding of these concepts can be so valuable.
How so?
It can help us make sense of current events, engage in more informed debates, and maybe even make better decisions about our own economic futures.
It's like having a secret decoder ring for understanding the economy.
I like that.
Well, that wraps up part 2 of our deep dive into the general theory.
But don't go anywhere just yet.
There's more.
Oh yeah, in the final part,
Yeah.
we're going to explore how Keynes's ideas have influenced economic policy.
And how they continue to shape the world today. Welcome back to our deep dive. It's the final part.
The grand finale.
That's one way to put it. And I got to say, this has been a real whirlwind tour
A lot to take in.
of some pretty complex economic ideas. But I feel like I'm starting to get it.
That's great to hear. And we've still got a few more insights from Keynes to uncover.
Oh, there's more.
Oh, yeah.
Lead the way. What else did Keynes have up his sleeve?
Well, one of the most important things he gave us was this idea of what he called aggregate demand.
Aggregate demand. Sounds like we're getting into the really technical stuff now.
It might sound a little intimidating, but it's actually pretty straightforward.
Okay, I'm listening.
Aggregate demand is just the total demand for all the goods and services in an economy.
At a given time.
Right. It's like taking the pulse of the whole economy.
How much is everyone spending?
Exactly. And Keynes argued that this aggregate demand, it's the engine that drives economic activity.
So if aggregate demand is high,
Businesses produce more, they hire more workers, the economy grows.
but if it's low,
You get the opposite. Businesses cut back, unemployment rises, things stagnate.
like a chain reaction, one person's spending becomes another person's income.
Precisely. It ripples through the whole system.
And that's where government intervention comes in, right?
If aggregate demand is weak, the government can step in and boost spending.
Increasing that overall demand and getting things moving again.
Right.
So government spending isn't just about like roads and schools and stuff.
It can be a tool to influence the overall health of the economy.
Okay, I'm with you so far.
Now, remember those psychological factors we talked about?
Like all that optimism and pessimism.
Right, they play a big role here too.
So if people are feeling confident about the future, they're more likely to spend money, which boosts demand.
Exactly, and if they're feeling uncertain, they'll hold back, which drags the economy down.
So it's not just about numbers and data, it's about those gut feelings.
Exactly. Now let's talk about saving and investment.
I always thought those were pretty much the same thing.
Save money so you can invest it later.
Right. You put your money in the bank and it gets loaned out to businesses to invest in new projects.
That's the classical view.
But Keynes saw it differently.
He argued that saving and investment decisions are made by different people.
For different reasons.
Exactly.
Okay, so break it down for me.
Think about it. Individuals save for all sorts of reasons: retirement, a down payment on a house, maybe just for a rainy day.
Okay.
Businesses, on the other hand, they invest when they see profitable opportunities.
So their motivations don't always align.
Right, and that's where things can get out of whack if people are saving more than businesses are willing to invest.
Aggregate demand falls and the economy slows down.
And that's when Keynes argued the government might need to step in
To stimulate investment.
and get things moving again.
This is a lot to take in.
It is, but even a basic understanding of these ideas from the general theory,
Yeah.
it can be so helpful in understanding how the economy works, why recessions happen, and what we can do about them.
It really is a whole new way of looking at the world.
And even though Keynes wrote this almost a century ago,
It still applies.
his insights are still relevant today as we deal with things like unemployment, inequality, financial crises.
I'm starting to see that.
It's a powerful way of thinking about these issues.
Well, this deep dive has definitely been eye-opening. I feel like I'm starting to see things through a Keynesian lens, and it makes you wonder, are we really using the right solutions to today's economic problems?
That's the question we should all be asking ourselves. Keynes's work challenges us to think critically about these systems
To question those old assumptions.
and to be open to new approaches, and that's a pretty powerful legacy.
It really is. So to all our listeners out there, if you're feeling inspired, we encourage you to pick up a copy of The General Theory.
We'll have a link in the show notes where you can buy it.
And if you enjoyed this deep dive, be sure to subscribe to our channel and share this episode with anyone who you think needs a little Keynesian enlightenment in their lives.
Spread the knowledge.
Until next time, stay curious, keep those brains buzzing, and remember, the economy isn't a spectator sport. We all have a role to play.
That's right.